Football is the beautiful game. Every 4 years, the planet stops to watch 22 men battle for the ultimate prize in sports engineering, the World Cup. Billions of eyes glue themselves to television screens, flags wave from high balconies, and matching national stadiums erupt into absolute madness. We are told it is the ultimate showcase of fair play, pure athleticism, and clean national honor. But behind the brilliant stadium lights, the flawless green grass, and the screaming fans lies a terrifying corporate underworld. A hidden space populated by offshore shadow banks, literal suitcases stuffed with untraceable cash, bought democratic votes, and global cartels operating under absolute legal immunity. For decades, whispers echoed through the dark corridors of the sports industry. Whispers that matching final results were predetermined, tournament hosting selection procedures were aggressively rigged, and multi-million-dollar television broadcast rights were actively being carved up by elite white-collar masterminds. On May 27, 2015, those whispers transformed into a full-scale geopolitical explosion. At the Bauer au Lac, an ultra-luxury 5-star hotel overlooking Lake Zurich in Switzerland, top global sports executives were peacefully sleeping, preparing for an official presidential ballot. Without warning, Swiss authorities acting under strict, highly classified data warrants from the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation swarmed the compound. Plainclothes agents walked past the marble check-in desks, moved quietly through the velvet-lined hallways, and breached executive suites. Men who held absolute sovereign authority over global football were placed in handcuffs, their high-end mobile devices seized, and specialized sheets draped over them as they were led out the back doors into waiting police transports. You didn't just witness a standard regulatory check. You just saw the opening move of a massive federal dragnet that completely shattered the core architecture of the most powerful sporting enterprise on Earth. A shadow enterprise that pulled in billions in clean revenue while running a hyper-automated bribery ring behind closed doors. This is the declassified file on the secret syndicate that bought the World Cup, the corporate shell system that laundered the cash, and the structural illusion that proved that when it comes to the highest stakes games on Earth, the results are decided long before the whistle ever blows. For over 2 decades, the inner circle of the sport operated under a profound protective paradigm: total regulatory isolation. Because the organization was officially classified as a non-profit association under Swiss regional law, it lacked the intensive financial audits forced upon traditional multinational corporations. This legal shield created a breeding ground for supreme geopolitical dominance. Executive committee members effectively acted as independent global ambassadors, carrying the power to single-handedly decide which country would win the multi-billion-dollar economic stimulus of hosting a World Cup tournament. Investigative records later revealed that these committee seats were effectively operated as private auction blocks. If a sovereign nation wanted to capture the ultimate prestige of a World Cup showcase, they didn't just need world-class sports infrastructure or modern transit routes. They needed to secure the shadow approval of the syndicate's operational controllers. The currency of exchange was simple, clean, and aggressively hidden. Massive corporate consulting contracts, phantom marketing agreements, and wire transfers routed through small tax havens stretching from the Cayman Islands to Zurich. The sheer financial density of these digital payments caught the target radar of the Internal Revenue Service and elite international tracking teams. Cyber forensic units working backward from shadow bank accounts discovered a highly complex transaction engine designed to mask the origin of the bribe matrices. A single voting block purchase would be splintered into minor payouts for non-existent equipment leases, luxury travel stipends, and real estate investments in elite metropolitan sectors. The masterminds believed their hyper-global velocity made manual tracking impossible. They didn't realize that the intelligence agencies had already flipped key insiders, wiretapped secure penthouse suites, and mapped out every single node of the corporate sports empire. The counteroffensive was running, and the ultimate exposure phase was about to bring the entire empire crashing down into the light. The sheer scope of this systemic institutional corruption meant that the actual tournament matches were no longer about athletic dominance. They had become high-value assets inside a broader financial spreadsheet. As international investigators embedded deep within the corporate mainframe began tracking the specific routing numbers attached to these accounts, the structural scale of the operation began to clarify. Every single level of the global sport, from the broadcast distribution deals to the marketing licensing blocks, had been compromised. Executive decision-makers had spent years building deep financial partnerships with marketing corporations that existed only on paper. These phantom networks acted as massive conduits, collecting money from international corporate sponsors and diverting fractions directly into secure personal accounts held by the committee members. It was a perfect, self-sustaining financial cycle. The sport grew larger, television rights soared into the hundreds of millions, and the secret syndicate pocketed a premium fee for every contract signed. But as the target focus shifted to the upcoming host selection ballots, the greed of the organization finally outgrew its absolute immunity shield. To understand how a sporting association managed to construct an untouchable financial fortress, international fraud units had to map out an entirely new breed of white-collar shadow banking. The network did not rely on standard transfers or simple cash deposits that would trigger compliance alarms at traditional institutions. Instead, the syndicate utilized a deeply segmented strategy known as corporate fracturing. When an international sports marketing firm secured the media rights for a tournament, the multi-million-dollar contract was intentionally divided into dozens of minor sub-agreements. Each sub-agreement was tied to a completely unique, highly obscure shell corporation registered in jurisdictions known for absolute banking secrecy, such as Panama, the British Virgin Islands, and the Cayman Islands. These entities existed strictly on paper, holding no physical offices, 0 employees, and no legitimate commercial output. Their sole functional mandate was to receive automated wire transfers disguised as marketing consultancies or equipment procurement fees. Once the capital landed inside these offshore accounts, the transaction scripts shifted into high gear. The money was instantly broken down into even smaller fractions and blasted across a decentralized web of global digital wallets and private holding firms. A single bribe matrix intended for an executive committee member would travel through 3 separate continents and 4 different shell networks before finally arriving in a secure personal savings account in Zurich. This hyper-automated velocity meant that traditional forensic accountants tracing the money trail would hit a dead end at the very first border crossing. The syndicate operators believed their digital camouflage rendered them entirely invisible to global law enforcement. They did not realize that the Internal Revenue Service and international cyber tracking intelligence cells were already using advanced pattern analysis tools to monitor the systemic flow of offshore capital. The break in the case occurred when investigators noticed a highly unusual concentration of wire transfers all bouncing through a specific transit route in the United States banking system. Because international dollar transactions must ultimately clear through correspondent accounts in New York, federal authorities captured the exact digital routing fingerprints of the syndicate's operational controllers. The data revealed that the hosting selection votes for the World Cup tournaments were effectively being traded like high-value securities on a private stock exchange. If a sovereign nation wanted to capture the ultimate global prestige of hosting the tournament, they were forced to engage directly with the inner circle's brokers. The price of admission was staggering, often running into the tens of millions of dollars. The currency was not always direct cash. It frequently took the form of massive geopolitical trade incentives, exclusive broadcast distribution allocations, and corporate real estate portfolios handed directly to the family members of the executives. The syndicate operated with total confidence, secure in the belief that their non-profit classification under Swiss regional law granted them permanent immunity from external prosecutorial metrics. They viewed themselves as an independent global empire, answering to no government and bound by no national legal codes. But as federal prosecutors quietly compiled thousands of matching bank records, wiretap transcripts, and corporate compliance logs, the operational perimeter around the fortress began to tighten. The high-valuation business model of global football had transformed the beautiful game into a massive, highly calculated corporate laundering apparatus, and the investigators were finally ready to pull the main power grid down. International investigators unsealed classified logs proving that match-fixing rings, operated by elite underground gambling cartels, had successfully penetrated international friendly matches and preliminary qualification brackets. In these shadow operations, the target variable was not the ultimate winner of the game, but highly specific structural metrics such as the exact timing of a penalty kick or the total number of yellow cards handed out during a secondary half. Underground syndicates would identify compromised match officials or vulnerable players, offering them upfront cash transfers that frequently matched their entire standard annual salary for single-night operations. With the referee or key defenders secured, The Syndicate would blast millions of dollars into highly specialized, unregulated Asian betting markets, capturing guaranteed payouts because the exact flow of the game had been calculated in advance. To break a syndicate this massive, the Federal Bureau of Investigation realized they had to step inside the highest executive chambers. They found their entry point in an ultra-luxury multi-million-dollar apartment complex in New York City. The property was leased to Chuck Blazer, a high-ranking official who sat at the absolute center of the soccer apparatus. Blazer had spent decades living a life of extreme luxury, entirely fueled by millions in unrecorded offshore commissions. But he made a fatal tactical error. He completely forgot to file his United States corporate tax returns for over a decade. Federal agents intercepted Blazer on a New York street corner, showing him a stack of criminal indictments that carried enough prison time to ensure he would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. Faced with absolute destruction, Blazer flipped. He agreed to become a confidential wiretapped informant for the United States government. The sports executive began walking into high-level committee meetings, five-star dining rooms, and private luxury suites carrying a highly sophisticated microphone hidden inside a custom key fob. For over 18 months, every single secret agreement, every host selection vote bribe adjustment, and every offshore routing coordinate spoken out loud by global executives was recorded in high-definition data files by federal tracking units. This secret archive formed the absolute backbone of the mass warrants executed during the pre-dawn raid in Zurich. The corporate sports empire believed they were an independent sovereign nation, completely untouchable by any domestic judicial apparatus, but the digital recordings compiled by their own inner circle tore the veil entirely away. While tactical police forces processed the suspects, cyber teams initiated immediate stop payment commands across 31,000 connected banking systems, freezing the network infrastructure at its source. As tomorrow's massive stadium spectacle prepares to launch, and billions of passionate fans prepare to watch the ultimate match layout, the dark historical files of the organization stand as a chilling reminder of a hidden global paradigm. While the pure athletic competition on the grass is entirely real, the multi-billion-dollar corporate ecosystem that controls the tournament ensures that the ultimate board chairs, the television broadcast allocations, and the economic hosting rights are systematically fixed long before the ball is ever kicked off. The server racks may have cooled down from the historic raid, but in the modern digital landscape, new shadow brokers are silently constructing the next generation of untraceable shell networks, waiting to exploit the beautiful game all over again.